本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
What's good, Internet? It's April 4th, 2023, and you are listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 555. I'm your host, Rob Zachney, and I dedicate this episode to Fives, the realist clone. I'm joined today by our very own, I don't know, Kyle, do you see yourself as more of a Cody, a Rex, an Echo?
Which one was the one that led that small rebellion against what was the frog faced guy's name?
Yeah, no, that's Fives who did that shit.
Damn it!
Was like
You already picked the good one.
Yeah. Well, I didn't pick it. I dedicated the episode to him.
Also, it's dedicated to me.
Yeah.
We're missing a 5 though. It's 5555, right? What's the other 5? 5-star runtimes. This is going to be a long one. We're just going to commit to that now.
Episode 555 with the 5-star runtimes. Patrick's thrilled to hear that, given that he's
cannot
believe
kids. 2 hours and 43 minutes long. Like, what did you even do for that long? I don't listen to the podcast, so I have to come here to ask for an explanation of your crimes.
We recorded an extra 30 minutes on E3.
Yeah.
Because that broke right after we stopped recording.
We could not talk about E3 dying,
all right.
so...
Yeah.
That makes a little more sense. Okay. All right.
So we filled out a show.
Yeah.
We shot the shit about Kato's mixed Destiny feelings, etc. Just lots of various things. But yeah, it was mostly just hanging out, chatting. Yeah, there was a huge segment on MLB 23. So there's a lot of
Is that career mode good?
I mean, it's the road to the show mode is always good, but the storylines mode is what we talked about mostly. That's the one with the retrospective on the Negro Leagues, and that's very cool.
Excellent.
So we talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot to talk about today.
What if we just did a podcast where I asked you about the things you talked about on the previous podcast because I didn't listen to the previous podcast, but still want to be caught up in the lives and feelings of my friends.
Previously on.
Yeah, previously on Waypoint.
And this is what happens when a huge number of your relationships are maintained through the ritual of podcasting.
It is.
And so it's like you miss an episode. It's like, well, I don't know what's going on in your life. I feel really
I don't know where the line
from
between content and conversation. I'm always in the content pit. And so and the conversations then become content and then the content becomes conversations. It is
does this mean we have paraprofessional relationships? Is this the is this what happens when you're through the looking glass?
Yeah.
yes. There are times. Well, I guess we crossed that with sports a little bit, right?
Yeah.
This would happen with Austin quite a bit, where anytime there's a hint of Dragon's Dogma in the air, or Armored Core, Austin will send me a message, and then about 2 minutes in that exchange, it's like, should we just call each other in Discord and record this? And it's like, what do we do? How did we arrive here? You're right. That is what we should do. But I find it upsetting that we can't, sometimes find ourselves going, well, I just can't have a normal conversation. Gotta put this on a microphone.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was a bit when, a year or so after he retired, Johnny Carson appeared on Letterman's show, and he brought out a folding desk with a little microphone stand, and he sat down in the guest chair and then just unfolded this entire thing to have a matching desk with Letterman. And he's like, I remember the bit was like, Dave, when you've been doing this as long as I have, you discover this is the only way you can talk to people. And I was like, funny bit, Johnny. And now I'm like, oh yeah, no, that was probably
That's
just true.
just, yeah.
No, I mean, I thought, when people have brought up, in a hypothetical, if Sunday wasn't doing what I do now, would you play games differently and think about games differently? It's like, yeah, I probably should. Would I even be capable of doing that? When you've spent literal decades, having a certain relationship with something, healthy or not healthy, I don't, at a certain point, you can't break that. How? Can a therapist going to help me find a healthy relationship with playing video games at 11 o'clock at night instead of just putting on a movie from Shudder? I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. I would be getting out my metaphorical table as well. And just like, well, I might have a newsletter idea if I play this game from 11 to 11:15. So I better do that. So I think about it for the next day.
So, Patrick, speaking of just various news things and always having to sort of be on and assessing, I remember you were very warm about PSVR 2, but you also sort of felt it was a doomed expedition in the face of the realities of the VR market. And you picked out a story for us here today that it already looks like things are off to a rocky start for PSVR 2.
Yeah, my thought was when and also please excuse my teenage hormone sounding voice at times because I'm on the tail end I'm in the phase of sound worse than feels. Like I had an extremely minor cold, somehow no COVID again, but some sort of cold. Dodged strep, nice. Did not dodge the cold. Pretty much if a 3-year-old wants to lay their head on your shoulder while they're sick, there's not really a whole lot you can do. You're just inhaling the toxic fumes and hoping for the best. And in some ways, maybe that is what Sony has been doing with virtual reality. There's a piece in Bloomberg titled "Sony PSVR 2 headset off to a slow start as metaverse push sputters." Sort of the important takeaway is sort of a projection on the potential roughly first month sales of PSVR 2. Which are coming just shy of 300,000, 270,000. I believe I may be pulling this slightly out of my ass, but I think Sony intended to at least ship 1.5 million in its first year. And so whether that tracks with their expectations or not, I think, a device that costs more than the base PS5 itself selling at that rate, I think suggests something that was a worry of mine, which is that is there a market for VR, or is there the Meta Quest device and then everything else? And I think my intuition going into this was that I am glad that Sony is making the poor choice of making another consumer level VR headset. Rob, whenever I see you in person again and can just bring this with you and you can experience Gran Turismo, I'm sure you're going to lose your shit because by all accounts, it's an incredible implementation of the technology. And yet, going through that lineup of VR software when I reviewed it, back in February was, wow, this is a lot of games that I have played elsewhere. A lot of other people have played elsewhere. It's basically ports from the Quest plus a Horizon game and not a huge roadmap for where this is going in the future. And I can't really blame anybody for having a cautious approach to a device that very much seems like it'll have a price cut in the next 6 months in order to spur some interest tied to presumably some other, more big budget games that Sony has to be making because at the very least they're gonna commit to this for a couple of years, even if it's not necessarily something that you'll be getting big games for 5 years from now.
Yeah, it seems like you would. It's an odd thing where I am sure that the PSVR 2 is probably appropriately priced for what it is.
Yeah.
But the problem is that it is juxtaposed against a device that is probably a little bit underpriced for what it is, because that's the console model, is that, you sell the thing for a little bit of a loss and make it up with recurring revenue. And
we saw this
sales.
Explicitly with the Quest, right? Like they did the unprecedented thing of increasing the price. That I also think that price has then gone back down a tiny bit since. And that might just be the Pro model that kind of sputtered when it came out, I believe sometime last year. But
it's going to be tough when you have someone being like, well, for that money, I could just that's what a PlayStation 5 costs. And it's possible that in terms of sophistication and the demands placed on manufacturing to produce either of those devices, that is a perfectly fair price. But there is no way to get around the fact that your PS5 does a ton of things. It is, it's console. It is also an entertainment center, etc. And here's your PSVR, which is so you really like Gran Turismo? A lot. You really want to be in the fast car now, and I do. And to an extent, there's a lot of companies that have built built fortunes off of exploiting those types of niches, right? I don't know what the value of a company like Fanatec is, but they seem to be doing pretty damn well, selling high-end sim peripherals to that market. But PSVR is ruled out of that market because it's a PlayStation only device. So that's probably the other thing, right? Is the natural audience for a thing like PSVR 2 is your hardcore sim players who are that will perfectly complement my $3,000 race seat or my flight cockpit. And PSVR just isn't that conversation because of the exclusivity.
Right. And then, I was raising that before it came out. It was a huge sticking point in my review was that I think it was a very misguided, it's a real missed opportunity for them to have not allowed this to, even if it wasn't available at launch, to at least promise at some point, hey, we'll do some sort of PC support for this, because it really is an excellent consumer device. It is both expensive and like appropriately priced. Like those things can be true at the same time. I think all the analysis I've seen of the actual hardware internals is that Sony is not out here, making a shit ton of money off of the PSVR 2. I'm sure they are to some degree, but it is not as though like this is a device that could be sold for $100 and they're slapping $500 on top of it. Like it is VR is expensive, unless you're going to subsidize it, like Meta was doing for a while at the Quest before it kind of caught up to them. You are going to have this issue, and it's compounded by a lack of things to play. Like I played the Horizon game, I quite liked it, and now I'm right back in the rhythm I have been with VR before, which is I was very into it for about 2 weeks, and now it has slid back under a desk. Like now this time it's only one wire, so that when there is something that comes out that seems kind of interesting, okay, it's not a huge deal for me to put that on. And that is helpful. That was a huge part of why I never really engaged with the original PSVR beyond its launch, and like a couple of exceptions, because it was just a huge pain in the butt to set up. And it's one of those things where the PSVR 2 came out. I was chatting about VR with some people again, and my brother, he was at my house one time recently, and he's like, hey, I've heard these Quest things are kind of neat. And I was like, I have one just sitting around. I'm not using it a lot at the moment. And I put it on, and the thing I realized was that the PSVR 2's headset is a lot better.
Yeah.
The Quest is totally fine. Like I was actually shocked. I was expecting to go back to it and go, man, can't imagine ever putting this on again. And I was like, well, maybe one wire is too much, and I don't want to put on that PSVR 2 again. Which I think more just speaks to the state of the technology. It has both advanced quite a bit and not far enough, which makes me just, as someone that has been very interested and enjoys the technology and the experiences I've had in it, I just cannot wait to find out what is driving a company like Apple to want to produce one of these. By all accounts and reports, they are set to release or at least announce a VR headset that they're going to charge anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 for sometime later this year. And Apple doesn't have a strong history of supporting games outside of the iPhone and iPad, which is mostly just an accidental byproduct of those devices than it was Apple encouraging anything specifically. They just have a really poor track record when it comes to games. And the driving force behind any money being made on VR are games that are getting through Meta's kind of walled garden. They're very selective about the games that appear in their storefront, but part of that is to create a quality bar that is fairly high, and those games that do make it through end up making quite a bit of money. So it's a weird space. I was, I don't know, quite rooting is the way to put it, but as someone that wants VR to continue to flourish, I don't think AR is a natural replacement for what I like about VR. Those are sort of separate technologies, and they're frequently spoken in conversation with one another when we talk about like technology of the next 10 years. But I will be very interested to see what Sony does going forward, responding to stuff like this. That said, if I get a new Astro Boy game out of this, you know what? Ain't my money. Like it was all worth it to get them to make another game, because the Astrobot game on PSVR is tremendous, and I'll happily play that again on a PSVR 2 and whatever they're cooking up next.
I will also note that what is it? Astrobot's Playroom. So
tremendous.
I fired that because I think there's one area I'd never cleared when I first had it. And I was just like looking through my PS5, and I was like, I'll play a little bit of that. And two things were sort of notable. One is that Mina loves the little Astrobots, and like one of them in the main like play area in like when you load in is like trying to read a little book and making cute little noises. And Mina ran up to the screen and began kissing that little robot, which is very cute and also very bad for a TV screen. Yeah. Very profoundly bad for an OLED. I was just oh, that's so cute. Let me just see who can get me some lens grade microfiber cloths here in the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
Just one thing about this story that I would note, I think it speaks to what you're talking a little about, Rob, is that one thing the PSVR 2 lacks that the PSVR did have was, I don't know how you would classify these, but essentially casual, non-interactive experiences, things that are just you put on the headset and get to enjoy the notion of like looking around an entire space that is reflected by your head movements is not just novel, but is like really fun. Like PSVR came with, this is what I showed people over and over. It came with a little demo disc, and it had a couple of little experiences. You know, if you've ever used a VR headset, I'm sure you've done like a one where you're on a roller coaster. And this one was getting lowered into kind of like a shark cage, like getting lower and lower underwater and seeing different kind of flora and fauna and underwater creatures. And it's tremendous. And you didn't do anything except look around. And there is nothing, as far as I know, like that in the PSVR 2. And so even when I got it, it was like, my wife was like, "What do you? Oh, you got one of those new fancy boxes in there." It's like, "Is there anything that's worth me checking out?" I was like, "No, not really. Like, not. You're not gonna play. Well, Super Hot hasn't gotten ported yet, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it was. There's nothing that I can just put on and transport her to and see like, oh, this is how the display technology has evolved over time. It's all deeply interactive experiences."
So when you mentioned the Apple device, my thoughts immediately went to, honestly, like live events, because one of the things that Apple's also pushing is Apple Spatial Audio. Ironically, Sony and Apple are in the same spaces in on a lot of these fronts. Like Sony has 360 audio, I think, and Apple has spatial audio. They're two different formats, both trying to sort of deliver this idea of higher fidelity and more like a greater sense of presence. It's like
is the idea there? You know this better than me. That when you start to approach things like lossless or like high quality audio track, like to the average consumer, you hit a certain point where either through what they're listening through or even just their ability to discern hits a certain plateau, and that things like spatial audio that are more, I don't know, for lack of a better term, dynamic, actually impress the average user more than the audio quality getting higher, like on a thing like Tidal.
So yes, and the thing is, this actually has there's some background here. There was a format, I forget what it was called, but it was like audio DVDs, effectively. It was like albums with 5:1 mixes and such. Mm-hmm. And there weren't a ton of these, but to this day, if you look up like Blu-ray player reviews, because I just went through this, there's all sorts of like old formats that are not supported anymore that people are like, well, this, we understand why they don't support it on this new player, but it's a bummer for people who still have these old things. But I know a few people who did get into that stuff, and they did say it was incredible. But the thing is, obviously, it's sort of the same. It's the issues with VR. If you are creating an album, it makes so much better sense to mix it and prioritize a stereo mix, particularly a stereo mix that's going to be good on like earbuds and such, and doing something like, I'm going to create a 5:1 musical experience. You're obviously going to be hitting a smaller niche, but people loved this. The people who got into it really got into it. It just never took off. And I feel like the spatial audio stuff is kind of the successor to that, where it's like, past a certain point, nobody can really tell the difference between like levels of audio quality. I remember when I was looking more into audiophile stuff a few months ago, I think a researcher in this field was like, so the amount of sensitivity people can have to scrutinize difference in audio quality goes really high. People think like audiophiles, like the humans can't hear the differences in audio source quality. They think that like ability to discern drops off way before it actually does. We're actually pretty sensitive to differences in audio quality if we are solely paying attention to that. The minute it is like, I am reading a book and listening to music, doesn't matter. You might as well be listening. Your source quality, suddenly your ability to discern that and draw things from it really drops off. So yeah, like lossless audio isn't going, like it sort of caps out on what it can do. But this idea of spatial audio, it solves some things with like the way the physics of sound interact with the listener. But also I think it's really pushing this idea of, what if we could put you with the sensation of being in the concert hall,
Right, in a space,
playing.
as opposed to just having the audio just sort of like neutrally blasted into your eardrums.
But the thing is, Apple has huge pipelines to deliver that sort of content, and audiences that are used to getting that sort of content through Apple. Weirdly enough, despite Sony having like a music arm and motion pictures arm, they've always struggled to leverage that stuff effectively. They've tried in-house solutions repeatedly, and then after a year or two, they're like, oh, well, it didn't really take off. We're going to sunset this and move on. And so I can see that it feels like they may have ended up in the same boat here, where like you can easily imagine a lot of people could be sold on this stuff. It is like, put this headset on and you'll be transported to a rock concert or something.
Mm-hmm.
I could see Apple delivering that really seamlessly. Come their release. Sony hasn't managed to do that. Sony, I think, has gotten this stuff partnered through things like Disney Plus, but not through their own like devices, as far as I can tell. So yeah, that is one of the big things is VR gaming can be disorienting to folks, even those who are used to like video games, but also you do just need that ability to show somebody something where it's like, check this out, it's going to be awesome. And it is.
Yeah.
And if it is like, check this out and it's Horizon, no matter
here's 12 buttons that you need to remember. Yeah. And also, even if you have a passing familiarity with controls, these are brand new. You're like wrapping your fingers and your thumbs around it in a different way that feels more ergonomic. It's more naturalistic. Absolutely. Like, it is better than holding a standard controller, but it's a different mental map. And even if you can see your fingers represented on the screen, it's just a lot to take in. It's why, like, my youngest, like, when she used any of these headsets for, like a little in like 10-minute spurts, her favorite things are just like what are essentially interactive cartoons. It's just like an interactive movie plays out and she just gets to watch, little aliens or bugs skirt about, and she is delighted. And there's just a real lack of any of that here, despite the fact that, like, as you point out, like, there's actually probably no animation studio pushing the form of animation and aesthetic harder than Sony animation right now. Like, go ahead and look at like how the Spider-Verse has like completely changed the conversation about what animation can look like in modern filmmaking. And yet, like, where is imagine like the Spider-Verse aesthetic in like a 10-minute non-interactive film that you got to watch in VR. Like, that sounds sick as shit, actually.
Yeah.
But maybe you wouldn't produce that for a thing that was going to sell less than 300,000 copies in its first month. So I sort of understand the practical realities there as well.
The really, as dire as those sales figures are, and it certainly sounds like it's going really badly. Also, like, it is a new piece of hardware that released after the holidays. It is a niche piece of hardware. Like, I can't believe these numbers are that surprising, right? It's kind of like, it is about the slow start you'd expect for something like this. And like, while it is a bit dismaying, I'm not quite sure I say, PSVR 2 is clearly doomed. It's like, it's actually tracking with where it should be right now. It's just like, it's still in their power to change the discussion around this with content for it. It just isn't there right now. And the question is, when will there be something coming out of that pipeline?
Yeah, agreed.
So a thing that, we might as well just get this over with. As long as we're talking about gadgets and gizmos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, set up the whole office situation this weekend. I've still got like a lot of the wreckage behind me.
I saw your photo.
Yeah.
Then I saw lots of people commenting on your photo.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So right now I'm in that window where the dream has met reality. Yes. And I'm a little bit like, and I was fully expecting this, right? I'm undeniably like a little disappointed in how this has all come together, because like there were things in my head that, like, in how I imagined this room coming together, I just never like made affordances for. Like,
but also there's like certain things you can't know until it's literally physically in the space. Like, the layout of my office now, I would do things fairly differently were I to do it again, but I built everything, I put it together, I try to just adjust to it, and it's like, okay, in 3 to 5 years, I can, take another swing at it. But it's more about, okay, here are the mistakes, or it's more about what you just didn't expect. Like, I know you made, cracked a joke about not measuring like the monitor mount or something like
no,
that?
No, it was so this has actually been one of the big bummers is I assumed because my previous desk, which was the Jarvis, which is the competing product to Uplift desks.
Yeah.
Correct.
The Jarvis mount fits the fractal case that I use. And so I did not measure whether Uplifts does. And if you look up Uplift CPU holder, immediately you discover a million people discovering the same awful thing, which is that it tops out at like 8.5 inches or 8.25 inches for like case width. And the fractal is 9 inches wide. And so I've got a CPU mount that can't mount the capture PC. It sure as shit will not mount the Corsair. So
I'm not even familiar like this. Like you can essentially attach the PC to the desk, so it'll go up and down with. Interesting.
And that is,
I had not even
considered that because the thing you don't want to have with a sit stand desk is to have the ability where you can raise it to a point where you are tugging on the connections and like pulling away from stuff.
No, it makes sense. I just in my mind, I think usually when you like see pictures of people, we just have a standing desk upstairs that became my wife's desk when COVID started, and like hers is a more. I think when the people imagine and like that setup is like it's a laptop and like one external monitor and like very limited wires. Like I had not even thought through the idea of like what are you doing with one of these when you have a big bulky PC. And this obviously makes a lot of sense that there'd be a lot of these different considerations because it just hadn't even occurred to me that the PC would have to go up and down.
Well, no, and then so the other thing is this corner desk is like pretty big, right? Because I was like, it's going to have a lot of shit on it, so it's going to really consume this corner. That means, of course, the distance between the various components is increasing. So, like, I brought one heavy-duty, uninterruptible power supply up here in UPS. If I centrally locate it out of the way, the devices on the ends of the desk, like, you know, the TV and one of the PCs, they can't reach the power supply.
No.
So it's like, do I buy a second up so I have one serving each corner? There's some things you don't want to put on extension cords. PCs are one of them. But like, do I get a longer PC cord? It's not unsolvable. Right now, all this shit ended up on my desk. So like,
why can't you put in an extension cord? What happens to the PC if you put in an extension cord?
Anything with a lot of voltage running through it, you don't want to have an extension cord in it because that just becomes a fire risk. The end, like where the two cables meet, there's just increased risk of like fire for having like a heavy duty piece of electronics hooked up to an outlet through an extension cord.
Isn't that what the gauge, like that's what gauges are on extension cords, right? Where you can buy like insulation is probably the wrong term, but like, you know what I mean? Like they're like different levels of extension cord. You can, I had to go through this. I had to go through this
with things. So there's like, so yes, there's some extension cords where like, yes, the gauge sort of determines the load. That's possible here. The lower gauge, I think, is going to be like sturdier,
lower gauge,
bigger,
like
thicker,
like more juice you can put through it. Is the short version.
And so, like, there's certain types of connection that you just want, like a high, like for what the power draw is going to be. You're going to want a pretty like thick cable. But my understand, like, maybe this is overstated is probably the wrong word. Electrical safety, people get very like adamant about because the whole like people whose business it is to be concerned about this, like probably find isn't good enough, right? Like if you've created the possibility for like an electrical fire, someone's going to have an electrical fire. So you just don't create the possibility. So like you can get an extension cord that sure it's like rated for handling the types of loads that a PC runs, but that just that connection, that seam between two cords is an area of concern. So you don't want that. So like I can solve this probably by getting longer PC cords, but at the moment what I've got is I've got my capture PC and the UPS both sitting in the corner of the desk. And I'm like, oh, suddenly this huge desk feels way smaller and a little claustrophobic. And I have not brought the new PC up here. Once it is sitting here on this thing, it's going to be like several obelisks surrounding me. of sort of computing hardware, and then like, well, we're like, how much space do I have on my desk? So that's sort of the place where I'm at, where it's like I'm trying to figure out now, what do I want to move off this desk, and like how can I safely do that with the desire to be able to like have it go up and down, because that's going to just require some other choices, and I would really prefer to avoid putting like multiple upses in here, because that is like, each of those things is heavy. The battery's heavy as hell. But the damnable thing, Patrick, is like all these devices are connected, so you either put them all on an ups, or there's a possibility that you might as well have none of them on an ups, because if one device takes a massive surge and it's connected to the wall, but it's connected through different cables to every other device, then the ups won't protect those. So that's kind of the hell of this kind of setup. So it's like trying to figure out now how I can sort of claw back some of the space from all this shit. Like I made my peace with the fact that like it being predominantly a recording space with lots of like possible connections, and connections
It's
have to be
upstairs.
easy to get
It's not.
to.
It's not like something people are seeing when they walk into the space. And at least I have found, being in this house for 6 years, is in many ways you just have to assemble it and then live with it, and then over time you'll come up with ways of tweaking it, as opposed to thinking as though like your desk is in early access. Rob, you know what I mean? Like it's here, like the basic functionality works, and I think stressing too much over getting to the idealized form, obviously easier said than done for me, just given the difference in our personalities. But that I feel like some of those things, just by like talking to people, sitting with the space, just random like browsing of the internet, you just start getting ideas and like, this is the same way that I, creep on people's garages. How are you organizing your garage? You know what I mean? Like just stuff will strike you. Like, oh shit, I didn't even know I could do that with a desk. And then maybe that solves X, Y, and Z issue that you have.
Yeah.
Plus you have to actually use it. You have to sit in it to actually even fully realize what your problems are. But the up stuff is like a basic 101 issue. So I get that.
Right. So that stuff has to be moved out of the way. And I think the other big thing is I just had in my imagination, like all the tensions between these different like wants were resolved through the stuff I'd selected, where it was like, like with the desk this size, I'll have plenty of space for all the studio electronic shit and all the various connections and all the accessible and easy to fuss with.
Never.
And then I'll have plenty of space for like a clean desk where I can like, keep notebooks and like just do some like focused writing time. And like if I put everything up here, it'll be like I'll be getting sort of bullied by my PCs. Where it's like, hey nerd, what you got there? You get your little notebooks here. Let me throw some LED lights on them. Let me just blast some hot air at you. So like I was fully prepared for it. It's the this is a part of this process that I'm very used to, which is the whole like, I've been sort of daydreaming about this cool new thing. Okay, here's the reality. There's little frictions that I hadn't anticipated, and now they're all I can sense.
Right. Ready to buy 1 million long cables.
There's going to be some long cables because I think the Capture PC has to get off this desk. I think it's just too much shit on this desk. It's like it's so big. Can't believe it. It's so black. It's just like sucking all the light out of the room.
Both of my PCs are on the ground, on opposite ends of this table too. I just bought 6 foot plus cables for everything.
If I had and if only if I had just one CPU holder that fit this thing. The thing I'm thinking about is like, I don't think there's anything like special about the Jarvis CPU holder that means I couldn't just drill it into this desk. Like,
no,
probably not.
I just slap that shit on.
Yeah,
but then you're drilling into a desk. That's scary.
It's already gotten drilled into a bit in part of the process of putting it together, which I think is the other thing that like threw me off a little bit about this. So uplist instructions are like, and then you book a TaskRabbit to put it together, or you can do it yourself. And I was like, no. I will just have a TaskRabbit come and do it. But they don't have like prefer there. You know, what I mean, there's no certifications for this. Just like go on TaskRabbit and like find someone who's like
it's just a local person,
good
right?
at
it's
like
not
doing furniture. Yeah. And so
like sometimes when I've gone, done things through Best Buy or like I had a washer or dryer installed, I'm sure it's still contracted, but like they kind of handle that handoff for you. I don't know. Like it can be depending on where you're ordering from things. Like just when getting shoved off to a TaskRabbit place, there's plenty of great people that do work like through that. I got like some security cameras installed through there some years back.
But there's no quality control inherent to the platform. Right. It's just like, are the people giving good reviews to like the frequently used TaskRabbits? Are they like in this? Do they need the same things that you do? Who can say? My guy, we like spoke about like what I wanted, how all this comes together, and then I left him to it, and I spent like all of yesterday hauling shit out to the dumpster behind my apartment complex. And I'm busy with that for a couple hours. And then he's like, all right, we're done. And I go upstairs. He put it together backwards.
What?
Like classic IKEA mistake. How many times have I always wait until that's going to happen to me?
And the thing is, so it's not a huge difference, but it's small enough to throw me where it's like, this is an L-shaped desk. Mm-hmm. The exterior dimensions are pretty square, but one of the desk sides is 30 inches deep and one of them is 27.5. The 27.5 inch side is called the return. And he sort of inverted it from what I had anticipated and from what we had discussed. And then he made just a bunch of other choices like that flowed from that about like, then we just like put the CPU holder over here. That turned out to be moot, but at the time I was like, that's not in the right place. And it was just like every like small decision he just sort of forged through. And I was like, but this is opposite from what you described, what we said how this was going to come together. And he was like, no, it's the only way it could have come together. I thought, we could assemble it the other way, but nope, it only goes together this way. And I'm like going on the Uplift website and I'm like, I don't think that's true. I think they gave you the instructions for one side, but it's all supposed to be reversible. The entire thing is supposed to be agnostic about like how you put it together. And it's not the biggest deal, but at the same time, it's like not quite right. And also it was like this dude just went rogue in the 2.5 hours. I was like hauling shit out to the dumpster. He was just like, oh, I don't know what to do here. I better not talk to this guy at all, and I will just make a ton of decisions about how to put this furniture together. And so I'm like right on the border of do I want to raise hell about this? Like I had thought about doing this configuration anyway, but it's like it was definitely one of those things where it's like, so you just did you just ran into a situation where you're like, oh, this is opposite from what me and the client just discussed. Well, better just do it.
That's
so
brutal.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I'm a little.
I like a much kinder experience one time where we were trying to mount a TV upstairs and we ended up finding somebody. I don't know if it was TaskRabbit, but it was one of those services that connects you with like a contractor. And we could not for this house. The studs can be very difficult to find. You're trying the knocking technique. I've bought like 2 higher level beep 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 devices, but like all it will reveal to me sometimes is like there's a bunch of wires back there, like it is suggesting that there is like electrical back there, and you can't know whether it's live or dead. Anyway, so I did everything for the TV mount except for literally like it was on the TV. I just had not mounted it on the wall because this was going right where our kids are always hanging out, and it's like I'm not fucking around. I will pay the $100 to have somebody come in and do the final 2 steps. And like this really nice old guy comes in, like figures it out, like was able to explain a little bit about how the walls work. And he was like, I know that you explained it in the email or the description or whatever, but like you really did like 95% of the work here. I'm just going to charge you half. I feel bad. I'm going to be here for 10 minutes. And I was like, that's fine. I just need you to be here for the 10 minutes so that I feel better about this process. And that like, I just don't trust that like I could properly find the spot for it to be mounted and not collapse upon my child.
Yeah, that is the, it like I was looking at the instructions. It didn't seem that complicated, but at the same time, it also seemed like a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, I put together we bought it right as COVID started. Like everyone was like reshaping their homes. It's not an L shape though. It's just a rectangle. So it's probably a little less involved. And but yeah, it wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy that process.
No. This is the other part, right? Where it's like
I got to make my own mistakes though, Rob. You know, like that's the part of the fun of putting it together. Is,
then it's just on you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Actually, I think I'd prefer to be in Rob's spot, which is that you can have your distance from it. You can complain about the person you hired to do it, as opposed to what usually happens to me is that I get 45 minutes into the IKEA project and my wife goes, "I think that looks backwards." I'm like, "Fuck, oiled again."
Yeah. I don't know.
No one to blame but me and my lack of spatial awareness.
It's definitely complicated because like it's there's part of me it's like I don't know, man. Like, you know, for putting together semi backwards, like he did a very good job. But also I'm like, but also he just like hit a bunch of decision points and never spoke to me about it. And he was just like, I'm just gonna do this. And like I don't know, like you're being. Like it was a pretty steep hourly rate, the guy was charging. And I was like, I feel like you would have gotten paid for the time to speak to me about it. You know, it's just, you could have just pumped the brakes and been like, hey, this seems off from what we thought. We'll see if it ends up making a difference. Right now it is like, as you said, Patrick, still sort of in the early access, like burn in period, which I guess, speaking of burn in. So the other thing is I've got the big curved TV thing in here now. Curve's
close. Cool. It looked close.
It is close, but like with the curve, like the curve does make a difference. The curve like does make it start to feel more like, wow, this is like a really intense and awesome. Like I was playing the show on that and I was like, oh, I can see the ball like ways I've never encountered before. Like I'm just eating these pictures up.
Okay.
But it's like it's pretty big. It's I intended for it to be a thing where I'm sitting back a little bit further anyway. But like the curve stuff is cool. It's unnerving as hell because I thought it would like you set it to your curve you like, and then it would be like, okay, it just lives here like this. Every time you turn it off, it like relaxes and it straightens the screen back out. Which is fine, but every time you turn it on,
because it must be restrained. Like there's a strain that is being given to
there
the
has to be tension on it. Yes,
right, and so it has to be released. Otherwise, one day you're gonna be watching the game and it just goes boing.
It's all I can think about now. I just like every time I turn it on, it restores the curve, and the first sound it makes is a loud plasticky pop, and I swear to God, it sounds like a screen cracking. It isn't. God. I think it is like the contacts for the motor like being made and starting to move the motor. But it's every time you turn the screen on, it sounds like the first thing that happens is like, all right, let's just snap this baby in twain. So that is a little bit unnerving.
You're gonna hear that sound in the middle, like there's a thing that parents experience called phantom cries, which is like as your kids get older, you just have gotten so psychologically used to like hear them cry, need to go figure out what's going on, see if they need anything, and you just hear those until you kind of get some distance from it. I feel like your phantom cry is going to be that. Like you're going to be downstairs and you're going to hear it. Did it move? Like this is like what is that? A Reddit / creepy. Like, please write up a short story about Rob dealing with the snap.
I think this is just, small karmic ways that Rob is going to be paying for the amount of purchases.
The sins of the technology.
Yeah.
Well, there's
the sins of efficiency.
Overall, like
function. I am efficiency.
The curve stuff looks cool. That part I dig. Things that were wildly oversold. Multi-view, where the idea was you can like have you can do twin
source
pane,
inputs.
Yeah. So I knew this going in. It doesn't do 2 HDMIs. The LGs that are coming out this year will do 2 HDMIs, but not this version. But it doesn't support YouTube TV through multi-view. It supports YouTube, but not YouTube TV, which is weird because like the two apps like function almost identically. But it just
so the built-in app does not do multi-view. That's what you're saying?
No, it doesn't. Like you can watch YouTube split screen with like something you're playing through an HDMI source, but you can't like watch YouTube TV. So like the sports use case kind of went out the window for that. You know, with the computer here, it doesn't make a huge difference, but it was like, it's kind of annoying. And I feel like multi-view comes up a lot in reviews for like the C2s and this screen. And it's like, it's just weird to me that reviewers like talk about this and it has such limited functionality. Like, I don't understand how like reviewers for TVs were like, what a cool feature. And it like works with YouTube and nothing else.
Yeah, the idea that you cannot have, I mean, sure, maybe it's a limited technology, but I think on a very basic level, if you told me this display can show 2 sources, I would think that means HDMI 1, HDMI 2. Yep. Show them to me. If it doesn't have that, I don't know that you can properly claim you have multi-view, because that would be most people's interpretation of having things side by side.
Or like, I could understand like maybe you can't take 2 HDMI sources, but like something off its app library, I would think you should be able to pull, and it just can't.
Who's building these apps? Like, is this from like the LG?
This
library?
So I think companies decide whether they're going to support LG or not. LG is like frequently a bit like, they have most of the major apps. They're still waiting on a few things that may never come in. But yeah, I think it's like companies decide to support LG stuff. But like, this just feels like I don't understand why only YouTube is the one to do it. And then you look up like reviews for this stuff, and a lot was spent with people like being like, wow, you can like watch over the air TV and then be playing like PlayStation or something in the background. It's like, who watches over the air TV? Like we should, like the signal's great. Like it looks amazing, but like I don't have a TV antenna. I'm in an apartment building, man. It's made of brick. I'm in a bunker here. So it's just kind of a weird thing that I sort of hit. And I guess the last thing I would note is I may have made a lot of statements about like how cool bias lighting would be.
A lot. That seemed actually, if I recall, fairly central.
I was stoked. To your point. I was so excited for this bias lighting.
Yeah.
And something I probably should have mentioned, and if I'd sort of maybe describe this more clearly, especially to Kato, we could have gotten ahead of this. My walls are a very deep, rich blue, Kato.
Oh yeah, that's not gonna.
so the bias lighting.
That's gonna reflect shit.
It's all just blue.
It's all just blue.
It's just blue. It's different shades of blue.
Yeah,
but it's like,
oh my god, of course.
All the like pictures of people being like, oh man, like the colors flowing out of the game across my walls, and I'm just like, it's blue.
It's blue. Oh, that's a slightly warmer blue. Ooh, this blue's kind of cool.
Yeah, so it's a nifty device, but I'm gonna be again in the early access mode. I'm gonna be sitting here thinking about like, how much is that curve really worth to me? Because ultimately, that is the main draw here. Is, you know, that curve, and it is impressive, but like, is it that impressive?
I worry we're in a bit of a when you bought the Surface situation, which is that the one that you want. I mean, this is a first gen tech, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure there's going to be another generation. Like, this is such an odd device. There's been no discussion of it being refreshed with the screen generation like change that's happening right now. Like, this is a C2 screen, which was last year's LG. This year is going to be the C3 screens. I don't know if, like, again, this is going to be like a niche device. I do kind of wonder if there's going to be like a version 2.0 of the OLED Flex, because it had the same reaction from everybody, which is like, cool device, wildly expensive for what it does. And so I wouldn't be surprised if like there never is a refresh of this.
It has strong. You went to CES, saw cool tech, and walked out with a monitor that never gets made again. You know, so stuff you see, it's like that I associate with modern CES when it's been divorced from Apple being there, or even its like longer history of pre E3, in which like it was the trade show for video games, predominantly in the United States. Now CES is mostly like I go to The Verge to scroll through and see like a bunch of goofy shit that I'll never buy. It's like here's a 12K television, okay, yay! Like you technically, it's a way to like show off a cute piece of like R&D. That you've managed to manufacture and show in a consumer level form, but that maybe is not necessarily like, what is the market for it?
Right. And that's
the market's Rob.
Well, the market, like,
Now,
I think if it, Kato.
Rob, you had mentioned, don't they make the same panel without the flex capabilities?
No, you just have the C2 TV.
How much is that? How much does that cost?
Well, with the price cuts now, it's like $900.
So that's like within the ballpark of what a lot of that stuff would.
Yeah.
No, but Patrick, do you remember the price point of the curve?
Yeah, no, I got my goofs. I kink shamed Rob a lot.
I think
last week.
I think it is the like. In theory, for me, it was like there's a device that is kind of like perfect for what I like for what I want in a situation like this, and then there's a TV, and the TV is considerably cheaper, but it is not the thing that appears to be kind of perfect for what I want. So, like,
and how would you know that without actually?
Nobody has it on demo anywhere.
Right.
Nobody,
right?
And I would bet you though, in a showroom, this thing would show brilliantly. They would have it against a white wall and it would be like, check out this curve. And I would bet you like you'd have a lot of people who just get rolled on
just don't turn it on and off.
There's nowhere to do you just don't do stuff like that anymore, right? Like I'm growing up, like walking through like the Best Buy electronics section and like the separate, I don't even know if they have these anymore, but like they would have like a separate like high-end AV section where it's like, hey, does Dad want to buy?
Those.
Huh?
Best Buy still has those, but they are kind of a shadow of what they were.
I just think that people give a shit like the rise of soundbar, like things have gotten good enough for most people that things like Sonos. It's just like you can spend a fraction of the cost of what those things used to, and they look good enough where there's just less of a reason to have the let's get a bunch of money on Dad's wallet, which I think is what those things were set up for, in the 90s and early 2000s. It was my memory of them.
Yeah. So like, I think for me, it's, I'll be playing around with the screen for a bit more. I'm gonna have to make a call on whether I'm going to keep it, probably in the next few weeks. But honestly, a huge thing that's going to make me like inclined to keep it is returning this makes me want to jump out of my window. Like just the thought of like, put this back,
taking it off, putting it back. Yeah.
Like just like screens are bad enough. This thing.
How do you get that back without them telling you broke it?
Right. That is.
Can they come pick it up?
And also like it's weird, but the packaging defied the laws of physics because there was more volume, like unboxing it created infinite volume of packing materials compared to a thing that was just self-contained in a reasonably sized box. So the minute I took this like shit out of the box, my apartment filled up to the knees with styrofoam. Like I just can't, like everywhere I go, it's just styrofoam packaging materials. So
I had this recently. I forget what the device was, but like I was trying to return something and like the packaging was so efficient, and I respect it. But then I had to look up a YouTube video of an unboxing and essentially watch it in reverse to figure out like how do these little plastic pieces stack together to like fit the box. Like the box will only close if it goes in the order it was assembled. And so I'm watching an unboxing video to just figure out how I get it to close
and
properly.
TV boxes are open at the bottom, so it all just slides off, which is great until you unbox it the first. If you ever need to rebox it, you're fucked because there is no bottom. So you need to get those like heavy like zip tie straps to go over it, or else like you can't safely move it. So that's another wrinkle to this. But honestly, I can't even really assess it until I deal with some of the other desk stuff. But it's like it is a cool device. It is. Again, like in terms of the reality, slightly underwhelming compared to what I was sort of like geared up for. But at the same time, like it is kind of gorgeous. And it is a hell of a thing when you're sitting there embraced by the curve, playing in 4K.
The warm embrace of the curve.
Oh yeah, it's a hell of a thing. But
watching these Bulls come back from 23 points down, just DeMar DeRozan all over me, Rob.
Compton's finest. Sorry, just the again. I just I've got Stacey King now all the time in my head. I forget. We'll have to talk with this on sports, but someone explained the mouse
catchphrase and how it relates to basketball. What is it like a
mouse in the house gets the cheese. That's just free cheese right there.
Bang bang bang.
That's true, I guess. Yeah.
It's an incredible array of weird isms. Did you catch their they were calling a game out of Charlotte, actually. They're playing, I think it was the Hornets.
It was on Friday. Right?
Yeah,
I think so. And
the PA announcer was just like deafeningly loud, and it was just 2 hours of the Chicago Sports Network casters slowly losing their minds because the PA was so loud, it was coming through their mics and being like fed to their monitors. And so like I can only imagine how impossible it was to speak with someone just like blaring in your ears at all times saying the stuff that you're about to say. But it was an incredible mix of like what happens when the audio engineering setup goes horribly wrong for sportscasters. Because it was they once they noticed they couldn't stop talking about it. Anyway, so that was that's been my little tech corner desk.
Beep, 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 beep.
You know, I think we're gonna learn a lot from that Dead Space stream, Patrick. Like that'll be
that's the stress test, huh?
Yeah. Long day of gaming in front of the old Flex.
Yeah. I think we're gonna try and do that next week.
Yeah.
I'll have to come up with some way to represent the flexing around the. I'm gonna distort the edges. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my god. You not need to distort the edges.
God, can you look up like some sort of video that like review of the monitor, isolate the sound of it making the snap, and then just feed that into Rob's ears every once in a while.
Just every once in a while.
So the videos I watched did not do justice.
They didn't make
to
the
the
noise?
sound of the motor. You might hear the motors running, but like the snap is different. Like this is again, deeply unsettling. But that's just the sound of progress. I think that is the instead of being scary,
progressing toward the end of a warranty.
Time ticking forward.
Yep. Just every.
Can you get an extended warranty on that monitor if you keep it?
No. So the place I bought it from was like, nah, we don't really do extended warranties on stuff that like they do a lot of like service stuff for like audio equipment, like vintage stuff, like it was true for a lot of these like places. But they were like, LG stuff we leave to LG. So
okay,
I am on my own with this beautiful, strange objet, hanging out on my desk. Anyway, we will leave it there for now. We will take a quick break, and when we come back, we've got some more game stuff to chat about. Back after this. And we're back, and hey, just as a reminder, Waypoint Plus listeners got the podcast ad-free. Learn more at waypointplus.com and see how you could have filled that break with nothing but cool, jaunty little tunes that Kato drops in. So, Patrick, you are still on the Resident Evil 4 bandwagon.
Yeah, I'm nearly done with the game. When I reviewed it, I played about half of it, and I've been kind of working my way through the back half during my 4 days off. That's deceptive. That did not count. None of, I did get to go to the Cubs game opening day. That was I got to do that with my wife, and that was delightful. But it's like 1 day spent with my youngest coming back from a trip, and the oldest coming back from a trip, and the youngest was strep throat. Well, that's 1 day gone. The Tuesday, the first day, the youngest came home from school with the strep. Well, that's an entire day gone. And then Friday, I spent prepping for the youngest Spider-Man party on Saturday. So I guess I got to go to the Cubs game, and somehow I took 4 days off. But occasionally during that period, I continued to play Resident Evil. The thing I'll note, I'll kind of save overall thoughts towards once I've actually finished it in the next couple of days. But an interesting thing I would note about this one and where we talk about this game in sort of the broader array of remakes and revisitations that we're seeing increasingly for like more modern games is that there's just not that much of a distance between when Resident Evil 4 came out and now. And increasingly, the more I play, while I respect and quite like what is here, I almost wish they had been given more of a license to depart even further. Resident Evil 2 is a pretty radical departure in many ways from that base game. It is not just an aesthetic layer. And that's the oversimplification of what's happening in Resident Evil 4 as well. But it's like, look, man, that original game is still here. It's still great. You can buy it. Take a bigger swing. Like, why,
yeah.
I wish the swings here were bigger. And I made that note before, in talking about the game before, but it's a point that I think is only exaggerated the more that I play. And I think that also I've seen other, excuse me, folks who played a ton of Resident Evil 4. I played a lot of Resident Evil 4, but I played that game once, beat it, loved it, and kind of moved on with my life. But folks who have played it a bunch of times, it's like, I understand their complaints over the combat rhythm, where it looks awfully similar to how Resident Evil 4 plays, but there is a repetition and a specificity and a repeatability to the combat flow of Resident Evil 4. There's a reason it's a very popular speedrunning game, because there's a predictability to shoot guy in the knee, kick them with a quick time event, sort of stuff. Like, you can kind of get into a very specific flow. And understandably, Resident Evil, the remake, kind of makes it so you're not as quite sure what's going to happen. If I hit a guy in a kneecap twice, maybe he goes down. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he does go down, but he doesn't actually give you the prompt to do a melee attack. And so there's way more ambiguity in the combat. I don't have a problem with that, but I understand folks who look at this remake and go, well, gee, there are differences here, but it's awfully similar. And if it was more different, then you would feel less weird about the ways it was the same. And I guess that is the kind of the odd tension that this one exists within, is that I feel like, without knowing exactly what Capcom assigned to this team in terms of like, here's what you can and can't touch, it does feel as though there was a real genuine attempt to keep a lot of it intact, not quite change around the margins, but it's not wholly more than that, all told. And even though I think it's exceptionally well done, really fun to play, and a great entry point if you have not played the original, as someone that has played the original, I kind of can't help but look at this and go, I wish I was more surprised at the things that were happening here, and that they took some more risks on like reinterpreting what Resident Evil 4 was. I don't know that I needed it to be this whole notion of like matching the visuals to my memory. I sort of like would rather be more surprised by the things around every corner, as opposed to it just kind of matching the nostalgia.
Is it a bit like, we had the same reaction to Dead Space, which is like, this feels a lot like Dead Space. And then it's like, no, it is not actually. It's like profoundly different in ways that we spent a lot of time appreciating and coming to understand. But like, the initial impression was consistent with our memories, but then it is a different work. It is doing different things. It is going about its business in a different way. And Resident Evil 4 just sounds like it is actually that thing where you come in, you're like, man, this feels just like Resident Evil 4. It feels a lot like Resident Evil 4.
I think it's closer to that.
Yeah.
I think it is definitely doing things like Dead Space, where if you were to play it back to back or simultaneously, that you would be surprised at the amount of things that don't match your memory. But I do think it's not quite just like layering on a new coat of paint. That does a real disservice to a lot of the interesting design work that has been done here. I'm just not somebody personally who gets, like, when remakes, whether it's movies or games or whatever, for me, like, I would rather the creatives behind those works reinterpret the work as opposed to just trying to match the past. And like, there can still be a joy in that matching, but that stuff already exists. Like, do something new with like the template or the foundation. And I just kind of wish there was a little bit more of that happening here. But, I think that also speaks to the foundation of Resident Evil 4, which is that, I could also understand looking at it and going, yeah, but why would we do that? But then you start to get into the whole exercise of why are we doing any of this at all? And then that can get dark and cynical pretty quickly. Whereas, I think we discussed this when we were discussing with Ren, but like, she was asking about Resident Evil Code Veronica, which is a game that you could not do this. You could not take its foundation and go, just upgrade those graphics. You really have to like radically rethink, how is that game working? And I think because Resident Evil 4 was as good as it was and still feels relatively modern, you end up with a game that feels kind of safe by comparison. And while still excellent, I wish was a little riskier.
So I'm just hesitating over this next story because, like, it's the actor playing Ada Wong being targeted by harassment campaign. This is one of those things I see these stories generated so much of, like, Patrick, and we can keep this in the podcast or not. It's just like where I tend to come down on these things where like it feels like now increasingly there is a culture war industrial complex that we're all stuck in to an extent of like we amplify shitty hate campaigns, like the whole like Last of Us's third episode is being review bombed, and it's like what the fuck does that mean?
I agree. I think it is it is like both worth noting like that, you know, the amount of like shitty folks who are, I think what is worth noting is the actor Lily Gao scrubbing their Instagram of just discussion of their own work, Resident Evil or otherwise, because they have been targeted by shitty Resident Evil fans and thus don't feel they're essentially self-censoring as a result of a like harassment campaign. I think that's noteworthy. I am with you though, Rob, on the broader point. And I remember pointing this out with the Last of Us stuff, where you get lots of websites aggregating these culture wars in a way that, well, the moment you share it, all you're doing is amplifying and attracting those same bad actors. You're just participating in the homophobia, you know, as was the case with Last of Us, by pointing out what's happening. It's like, oh, who fucking cares what they have to say? Just like it's one thing to write an editorial speaking to it, right? Like if you have something to say about the material, it's like I get really annoyed when it's just an article about like embedding a bunch of tweets from like far right actors, and it's like, look at these shitheads. It's like, who cares? Why do we need to write about them? So I'm with you. Yeah, no, I mean it is tricky because like obviously these like campaigns are enormously destructive and harmful, and yes, like clearly like Lily Gao is sort of batting down all hatches and is trying to disappear this piece of work from her like online presence. And you know, obviously there's people speaking out in support of that, and this is something that happens to like voice actors, particularly voice actors who portray like female characters in games. This is like really awful, comes with the territory type stuff. And I think that's maybe another part of it that makes it trickier to cover is these things are so like routine now that it also becomes like kind of harder to discuss because it is now just, oh, did you play a female character in a notable video game? Well, here is the other thing that comes with that, which is awful misogynistic fan bases. And there are people out there, you know, voicing support and such, but ultimately the damnable, frustrating thing about all this is like, it doesn't feel like we're any closer to there being a solution to this. We can post as many like people who speak this way need to get the fuck out of the industry. Games are for, we can say that as many times as we want, but these folks are just sort of camped out and post up and waiting for new targets. Right. And it's like, I don't know. It is a problem that I certainly don't know how to solve. And it's something like obviously worth continuing to talk about. But at the same time, I look at like the way a lot of these issues get discussed, and it does end up feeling like it falls into a pattern of kind of rewarding these harassment campaigns. I think like the Snyder stuff was like the primary like ground zero for a lot of that, and that came after hopefully lessons learned from Mary's media outlets from things like Gamergate is like, look, how much power did those shitty fans actually have, or is every article that was written about them just a way of attracting those very shitty fans to celebrate the fact that you wrote about the shitty fans, but then also to attract the people that don't like those shitty fans, and then it's just a different form of clickbait, right? Like it is just there's no healthy discourse happening in there. It's just a way of aggregating outrage in a way that is very cheap and easy to do. It should become such a part of. I think I talked about this on Shift F1 the other week, but it continues to just sort of be front of mind because
the shitty thing about Google phones is that if you swipe to the left, you pull up their news you might find interesting, widget on a Google phone. And effectively it's like Google's around the web links, but it's like right there almost on your homepage.
Rob, I have the amount of time I recently figured out that a friend of mine had been sending me. I was like, why every time, like 3 different times you have sent me something, be like, isn't this interesting? And I click on it and I'm like, none of this is true. Or it's like framed horribly. And I eventually was like, realized it was coming from exactly what you're talking about. I was like, sorry, man, like this is just not a good place to go to get information about a film or something.
And it's happening fucking everywhere. It's like on every topic. So like when Henry Cavill left The Witcher to go do DC stuff, and then all the DC stuff gets blown up, and there's like rumors coming out of the Witcher production that he's just a huge weirdo to work with and was like toxic and misogynistic, but then also maybe like they weren't working with him well, and like the Netflix, but you can sort of see that there's entire like content mills generating stories for both camps in this. Out of what appears to be like nobody's ever really given that many explicit comments about like verifying any of this, or the notion that there is like a Cavill camp and a Netflix camp and all this. There's very little like to pin down and identify what's happened here, but there's this like content industrial complex creating this notion of like the pro and anti Cavill camps and having them fight online. This is just kind of everywhere. Now.
It's difficult because on one hand, you don't want Lily Gao to experience, like, not have it acknowledge what is happening to her. And the difficult part is, okay, once you've acknowledged it, what do you do as part of that acknowledgement? And I think that's, to your point earlier, not that I expect any of these articles to have a solution. If anything, it's maybe the problem here is that, you don't have someone like Capcom coming out. Like, the most powerful actor in any of this is the publisher that gave her the voice direction on this character. Like voice acting is so specific to the direction given from the companies producing it. It's like the actor in the scenario, Capcom. I guess I don't mean that as a voice actor, but like Capcom is the company. So far, at least from what I can see, have been silent. So I'm sympathetic to news outlets that are coming at this from a good faith place of this person is experiencing like a form of like online suffering, and it's worth pointing out that is bad, and that whether that's a form of like solidarity or at least just pointing out like bad thing is happening, it's worth acknowledging that. And yet there's a fine line between, and I think that's why the Last of Us stuff got me so upset, because I think there's something like reading like the Eurogamer piece is the one I linked for us to go. And I think Vicky Blake at Eurogamer did a great job sort of like covering the bases of like what is going on here. What, and try, does not fall too far in that territory of the stories that bug me. The Last of Us one bugged me because it's like people are writing up the IMDb like comments and ratings. It's like, why the fuck do I care about that? Like, you have to explain you have to justify. It's okay to write up people saying things somewhere, but give it context. What do I give a shit about like the IMDb ratings of this fucking episode of a television show?
Yeah, increasingly, I don't give a shit if something's being Steam review bombed. Like it, like yeah, we get it. Like people are like, here's who we hate today, and show up and they try to like wreck their business, but it's not a huge deal. I guess maybe with stuff like this, where I do get a little, like I do get a little bit more tuned in. Is like there is a workplace safety of this aspect of this that I think is not being like handled sufficiently. When you say like, what is Capcom doing in a situation like this? The thing that concerns me is you had a lot of like contractors who are like, thank you for your work. Good luck out there.
Right.
And, there's situations, there are times when like people genuinely might need someone to open their mail. And I don't just mean like to like, to see like physical mail because like somebody's trying to like send you a bump, but I just mean like, we are going to give you a social media manager for the release window who for like 2 weeks, you like, we'll just handle this and we'll just be the person like running point on absorbing this. And you can go off and live your life, but you don't have, like, if the actor is the one who had to scrub their own timeline and handle all this on themselves, I think that is the stuff that like really gets under my skin. Cause if we are saying this comes with the territory and this is sort of a fully predictable outcome of working in the space for these types of characters, then the people commissioning these characters and people like asking this work to be done need to be like made to bear the costs to some extent of doing this, rather than it being like, oh damn, it's so bad what's happening to these actors. Sending positive vibes your way.
Right.
That's like sometimes what people need is like,
that's not like signing them up for delete me and getting like their personal information scrubbed from different places, which is like a very practical way of protecting people when they become the target of harassment campaigns.
Yeah.
Kind of, I thought were you trying to say something earlier?
Nah, I mean, just I feel like the Steam review thing was like, there's a small difference there because it's the place you go to purchase those things versus like, IMDb and like other review, like Letterboxd and stuff, where like you kind of have to go searching for that sort of content there. But I can see why it might be worth just like pointing out that it was the reason there's such a big jump. And like, that's why Steam added that little like thing. Like, we think this was bombing activity. It's because sometimes it's like it got bombed and it's not bad. So we don't want to like, we gotta give the devs a chance at actually,
Well, it affects the algorithm, right? Like it affects how things are displayed in the Steam store, and you can imagine that being weaponized to try and punish games that are too woke or whatever is the allegation.
It is a more serious, like it is like it's a world of difference between like, I guess just because the bear is on my mind, but like Steam reviews is like people like throwing a big C into your restaurant window.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, you don't want to know what's going on here. Like, it's not passing inspection. And really, it's people just with an axe to grind, making it look like this product is legitimately like shit.
Yeah.
And actually, it's like, I don't like what the developer tweeted the other day, or I don't like what this game is about. But whereas like, but IMDb reviews, who gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
Like literally nobody in the history of like the internet has ever been like, is this any good? I shall go to IMDb to find out. Mind you, IMDb is still out there pitching like, we could be a portal of whole bunches of experiences. No, you're not. No, you're not.
They have television shows.
I know.
IMDb made things?
IMDb TV.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
it still exists, right? They're still pitching it.
There was a major show major, and like it had a really notable actor. What was it? I'm trying to find it. I don't know, but yes, they have
so ironic, and we can't figure out who was in the cast for the IMDb TV show.
Look it up. No. Yeah, IMDb TV does not work as a search. It's not bringing it up.
But yeah, I found it. I found it. On April 13th, 2022, it was announced that a spinoff of the Prime Video series Bosch, titled Bosch Legacy, would premiere on the IMDb TV service on May 6, 2022. Wait, is this for the part of the series where? No, because canonically, Harry Bosch leaves the LAPD and then comes back to work cold cases sometime later.
Okay. I guess. Sure. It's just,
and then I think there's that actually is the TV now. I think they even introduced a like passing of the generational torch where it's like Bosch's daughter has followed in his footsteps and has become the new, like literally it's the fake TV show in Only Murders in the Building where it's like Bosch's daughter is the new Bosch.
I just, I was being very getting Boss Baby vibes from this just because my brain immediately went to like Risk Legacy or Betrayal, like all of the like, long form board games that have that sort of naming convention. This TV show you can only watch once and it'll change.
Well, there was the one I didn't watch it, but there was like the Netflix heist show where it played the Kaleidoscope, I think is what it called, where it played the episodes it just picked a random order.
I thought you were talking about the one that you could pick stuff. Was it
Benedict those two? But there was a heist television show that I believe the finale, when you click play, it picked a randomized order for the episodes except for the finale. The finale was the same for everybody, but it was meant to be was like shot, written under the assumption that you would watch it in a different order than other people, which means that like your setups and payoffs kind of happen differently because obviously you're experiencing sort of the timeline in a fractured manner.
I remember another one where you actually like picked things. Was that on Netflix though?
They've done most of that stuff, right? Yeah, there was the interactive Black Mirror episode, right? Isn't that the one you're thinking of?
But there was a show they did that was like,
yeah. I can't find it.
I swear to God, there's a choose your own adventure thing that they did. Like,
yeah. This is what I'm thinking of. And like,
well, they put. I mean, there was a Black Mirror one. They've also Netflix had like the Minecraft Telltale game in there that was interactive. They have kids interactive elements on there where like you pick. Like
you're right.
Kind of it wasn't from shows we watch.
It wasn't it's technically a film, but it is Black Mirror : Bandersnatch, and I kept wanting to say Benedict Cumberbatch was in this thing because for some reason my brain was like Cumberbatch, Bandersnatch.
Choose your own Benedict Cumberbatch adventure.
Bandersnatch. That's what
Bandersnatch Cumbersloot. I love that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's every time I see like something posted about like there's a review bombing campaign on IMDb, it's like I want to hunt you down. Like every single person, it's like, all right, we need to find the masthead of Collider and just the most dangerous game, those motherfuckers.
Well, it's all derivative of a similar sort of article that also bothers me. It's like gamers are saying, and it's like, what gamers are saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just explain. It's okay to take a communal response and then explain it to people, but like whenever it starts with gamers are saying, it's like, oh boy, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Having spent all that time talking about like the degree to which collective frustration and outrage gets overstated, I do want to talk about the Last of Us PC release because this does seem pretty widely reviled. Might be too strong, but might not be too far off either. It has not been it feels like we've had a run of really great and well received PC ports of like Sony flagship games.
Resident Evil 4 was a game that came out on the PC and by all accounts has a excellent PC version. The RE engine remains undefeated for the last like 5 years.
But things have not gone as smoothly with the Last of Us PC release. Digital Foundry did a pretty, as is their wont, a pretty detailed breakdown of how the game performs. And it seems like one of the big issues is it just doesn't use PC hardware very efficiently at all. Like if you have a PC that is fairly, they sort of make a point of this in the Digital Foundry video. If you have a PC that's fairly closely spec'd to what a PS5 is running, it doesn't get anywhere near the performance outcomes that the PS5 enjoys, which, I know that like historically, this is one of the salient features of consoles, right? Which is that, because it's a locked spec, you can wring a lot of performance out of it that is much harder to recoup in PCs with all the vagaries of the ways that the same basic hardware can be configured. Nevertheless, like the PC version seems like a real dog on like mid-level PCs where you're just not getting something that's remotely comparable to what is on PS5 and has a lot of really shockingly poor quality like textures, for instance, that are thrown in there that look for like not just like they're from a generation ago, but like maybe 2 generations ago in places where you get like lots of basically smeared textures in places that on the PS5 it's really detailed, like legible text even. It seems like those issues go away a little bit on higher end PCs, but even there, I'm not so sure. I was playing around with it this morning. And one, like there's just some things it doesn't do well out of the box that a lot of PC games right now do, which is, for instance, I've got the TV I've got that the gaming PC is hooked up to is a G-Sync capable display. The G-Sync stuff didn't work. I was getting like weird tearing playing it. And I looked this up, and it's like, well, no, to make it use G-Sync, you have to go into the NVIDIA control panel, not GeForce Experience, but the little control panel thing, which is much more like a Windows dialog box thing.
Yeah.
And you have to go into, it's a thing I use so little that I even have trouble like navigating to it because it is it's just not something that comes up that often.
You just have to right click on the desktop, right? And then you'll get the...
Yeah, but then in the NVIDIA control panel, you have to go to manage 3D settings. And I've never fucked with the screen. I've never messed with this in like, ever since they introduced the NVIDIA control panel, like years ago. I've never had cause to do this, but this is the fix to get rid of tearing on your PC for Last of Us. You go into manage 3D settings, you open program settings, and you create specific profile stuff for The Last of Us to basically turn on, to let your card do its like G-Sync stuff.
I mean, this was more common when PC ports were worse. I remember it always reminded me of similar to like the MS-DOS, like hit F8 so that I can like I can manually figure out my memory load so that I can run Dark Forces, which was like that was my like last use case of that. But especially if you have either bad PC ports or an underpowered PC, it would not be totally uncommon for people to recommend like, hey, if you're trying to juice 10 more frames, like you got to go into these like manual NVIDIA settings. But it is, especially given the quality of Sony's PC ports recently, and the fact that this was promoted as like a part of Naughty Dog pushing into PC. They've talked about the fact that they want to do, if not simultaneous PC, PS5 development, they're like being more cognizant of the PC as a co-platform for things they're doing on going forward. My guess is with Last of Us Factions, the big multiplayer game we're going to hear about later this year. If that's not simultaneous on PC, my guess is being planned as like if you're doing a multiplayer game, you're going to want to be on PC. I think the one thing that is different here is this was from what I understand, a like in-house / co-production with Iron Galaxy Studios, a company based out of Chicago, who I've got a long history with. Dave Lang and Adam Boyes, like conflicts of interest, like out there, like a lot of stuff I've done with them over at Giant Bomb and other places over the years. But they've also they're an engineering port house and work with a lot of studios to put out games like this. Sony several years back acquired, I think the studio is called Nixes, which is a piece. They specialize in PC ports, and I believe they have been the studio that has worked on these other ones in the past. And this is an instance in which that process has been different. Maybe that is because Naughty Dog wants to be on the ground floor, like building this, have a better fundamental understanding, and this becomes a test bed of, how they do stuff going forward. But it seems like a pretty rough, like out of the gate experience. Some of it I do wonder is like, Robin, you and I talked about that PS5 version. It's stellar. Like it is gorgeous. It is a technical powerhouse. It is an excellent update to an already excellent game. And you have like God of War, some of these other ports have been games that are several years old, right? Yes. They are not current gen level games being ported over. And is some of that just what you get for free from the march of technology and the distance from an older piece of, like a PS4 is, a 10 plus year old like base level that you're working on. So of course, modern GPUs are going to have an easier time with it. And then here you have a code base. And, I'm speaking out of my ass, technically speaking, but it just wouldn't shock me if this is more baseline current gen specs, development pipelines, engineering techniques, you're just not getting as much for free bringing it to the PC. And there has to be so much more work that goes into getting that to function efficiently.
Yeah, it is like, I wouldn't be surprised it's part of it. Like, I think one of the really well received PC ports, like for instance, the PC version of Spider-Man, that is not like if you're going to play that game for the first time right now, if you got a decent PC, that's where you go, because that is, that's got a lot of bells and whistles that you will not get even on the PS5, I think, with the playing the back compatible PS4 version of the original Spider-Man, not Miles Morales, but the original one.
But both those games had PS4 and PS5 versions, right? And I guess maybe did this Last of Us Remastered, is that PS5 only, or was that on PS4 as well? I don't know.
That is a good question. No,
I think that was the point, right? It was the like PS5.
They'd already done a
PS4
remaster
game
for the PS4. They'd already done this once before, where there was like a.
Wait, do you mean the remaster or part one? Because part one is the PS5 thing, right?
Yeah. So the thing
I think that's what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah. Because remaster was way back when, like right on the cusp, and it was just kind of like a slight graphical upgrade that very obviously used a lot of the PS4 version.
Okay, no, this Last of Us Part 1, this is according to PlayStation.com. Yeah. PS5, PC. Last of Us Remastered, which is what you're referring to, Kato, was a game that was taking the PS3, bringing it to PS4. And so this supports my like broader like theory of, hey, if this is, more baseline PS5, whereas like both the Spider-Man games at least had a PS4 version that existed.
So I will say, like, playing it on PC, like sort of maxed out, there's like just wild levels of details you might expect. It's, I can only assume the sheer amount of like server acreage that Naughty Dog has, just like keeping textures on file for various things, right? Just entire hard drives full of like muddy dirt textures that you're going to put around the world and such. And like, you play it maxed out, it's all there, and it does look incredible in a lot of places. The one thing I did note, though, is that I would have to play them side by side to check myself on this. The weird thing is, it felt like there were little, like, Digital Foundry stuff did talk about like there being lots of little hitches, but that's not quite what I'm talking about. There's a sort of snappy immediacy to my experience playing on the PS5 that is just a little bit off on the PC version, and it like shows up at really big moments, like in the opening cutscenes. This is what I played, so I once again went through the saga of like, oh no, Joel, we got to get out of here with your daughter. Oh no. Didn't work out.
What a cool benchmark test, like time to child death.
Yeah, exactly. This has become the like, so what's changed in The Last of Us? How realistically can we get this child brutalized by a soldier? But
did the explosion at the gas station look any different?
So it does. This is the thing. This is a perfect example of where it's a little different. I feel like on the PS5 version, the explosion looks completely seamless and natural. Like it all just happens and it's like, wow, like crazy explosion, right? On the PC version, there's like this little moment where I could see, it looked to me like they're just swapping out the light map for the level, like just a split second before the explosion triggers. Like it's a fractional thing, but it's like you can just see all the assets like change. And then the explosion happens. And the similar thing happens with like the car accident in the beginning, where you just have that like little micro hesitation and then the event triggers, but you see a bunch of things like change in that like split second. And if it's the like, video games are creations of smoke and mirrors, there's stuff happening even like on the highest end of the PC where it's like you can see the magician's assistants running out and preparing the trick. It's very slight, but every time it happened, I was like, oh, like I know how you achieve this now. I can sort of see where like, okay, you like models have been swapped out, like the skybox may have just changed. And you never notice. It's
just kind of like when you watch a movie in 4K and you can see like the wires, like that, certain things it just, because of how it was shot and the technology it was going to be displayed upon, they just didn't account
the fucking
for
Hobbit
the
movies in what was it? At a super high frame rate, all of a sudden every piece of fur you could tell they were all fake fur. Like
yeah. So it could be stuff like that, but it's a weird thing because like on the one hand, once you get into it, once you get going, it does look amazing, like on a new PC. But at the same time, I'm even in my situation, I'm still not sure it's like a better overall experience than that PS5 version, because like that thing is just so like nailed down and as tight as a drum. Whereas this thing, yes, it can absorb having a ton of hardware resources thrown at it, but there's just ways it doesn't quite seem to lock together quite as successfully as it does on PS5. So
there's something profoundly funny that Rob got as close to the sun as possible, got the graphics card to end all graphics card, and then immediately gets delivered a ham sandwich of a PC port that just reminds you that you can throw everything at it. And like, that's just the nature of PC gaming, is like there will always be something that is a little unoptimized, not quite there, that just doesn't matter what you toss at it. 64 gigs of RAM ain't gonna make this thing sing.
Well, I mean, but the thing is though, compared to what people with like more like, for instance, what is in my old PC, that would be a dog shit version of Last of Us.
Yeah.
If I were playing Last of Us on the captured PC, I'd be like, what the hell is this? What is this? This sucks. And so I think it is one of those, like, once this thing's up and running on like my PC, it's like it, wow, like there's just, wild levels of detail that are possible here. But yeah, it is the like, yes, even sort of maxed out, you still have if the optimization stuff doesn't go as well, no amount of hardware is going to save you from that reality. And then for anyone not in that situation, it's just like, good luck playing this. Here, have a ever really like mediocre playing version of The Last of Us. I'm sure with time this stuff gets patched out. As I understand it, they've already like they're sort of working overtime on like rushing these patches out. I'm sure a lot of the stuff gets ironed out fairly quickly, but it is kind of, it's just in a weird place where PlayStation was kind of like, not necessarily setting the bar, because there's a lot of people doing great PC ports right now, but this is definitely like an oddity in the run of PC ports that they've put out. Patrick, before we wrap up on games here, you've been playing some Bayonetta Origins.
Yeah, I wanted to revisit this just briefly. I mentioned having played an hour or two of it some weeks back when it originally came out. Bayonetta Origins is a like top-down kind of like action game, a different kind of reinterpretation of Bayonetta, which is typically sort of a character action game. You're beating up lots of enemies and demons, and here you have you're controlling Cereza, which I believe at the time I said is Bayonetta, and I think that is true, but it's like Bayonetta from a different timeline. I don't remember exactly how the Bayonetta mythos work, but she looks like Bayonetta, and my daughter calls her the cat lady. It's like, yep, that's the cute cat lady. She's like, why doesn't she? Is there like a meow button? No, sorry. And you're controlling, a demon on each of the analog sticks, and so you're kind of moving two characters at once, and the game is sort of bouncing between those ideas. And I just wanted to pay a compliment to the like 8 or 9 hours I've played since of a game that just. I feel like nobody's gonna end up playing this game. It's like a $60 top-down action game that like has the budget and resources and ambition of a game you'd more commonly associate with the name Bayonetta, and like it gets mechanically deep, and the story is fun, and the music is fantastic. And it was a game that I expected to play as a podcast game. Just like, okay, I'll play like 2 or 3 hours of this so I can speak to it on the show, and then. Like it has become a game that I am constantly returning to. When I've got a couple of minutes, you can always make a little bit of progress in 15, 20 minutes while my kids are doing something. It's the one that I'm picking up and playing. And it's just a real delight. And I think it's going to get kind of just sort of pass by this year. And so just wanted to, if you had any curiosity about it, hopefully it goes on sale or something at some point, or if you just need a push over the edge, it is exceptionally well done and really fun to play. And I think the sort of cute aesthetic betrays a more interesting game. The aesthetic works within the context of the game, but I think you can make some preconceived notions about what you'd be getting into. And I actually think it's more interesting and complex than you might assume at first blush. So definitely recommend people checking out more of it, because I've really been enjoying the hours that I've spent with it since.
Yeah, I definitely hadn't really tuned into how different this looks from what you expect of a Bayonetta game.
Not only that, and I think you look at that and your assumption may be not that you should necessarily extract price from a game's look, but I don't think it'd be shocking if you looked at that game. I was like, oh, that must be like a $20 downloadable like shoot off for the Bayonetta universe. Like, no, like it's a full $60 game that takes like 15 to 18 hours to finish. Like it is a full ass game that. I'm just really impressed by how much is there, and I think Nintendo kind of fumbled the bag on getting the word out on it in a way that I think people would have truly grasped like how interesting it is.
It's so weird to me. Like I know where it comes from, but it's so funny to me when it's like, oh yeah, like you'd sort of expect people to like, think this is a budget game from the appearance of it, and it's like, I don't know, it's like gorgeous cartoon art.
Yeah, it's really good. It's definitely one of like many games on Switch where it's fine, but boy, like if this game was running at like 4K, like 60 frames a second, like it is an art style that is clearly developed because of the constraints of the Switch, but also despite that being done in connection with the technology it's running on, man, like it would look gorgeous if it was just off that leash a little bit. Yeah. But no PC version. It was enough though that when I had my kids at the library this weekend, we check every time to see if my kid can rent Minecraft, and they have one copy and it's never there, but it's the first thing we do every single time to see if she can rent it for her Switch. They had Bayonetta 3, and I almost rented it. I was like, no, I have like 4 games I'm juggling before Tears of the Kingdom comes out. But I thought about it because this was enough to get me back in that mood. The library, depending on your library, has a surprisingly robust like level of new games. I've been shocked at that revelation every time I've kind of checked when I go back in. I mean, sure, it depends on the library you go to, but ours is not exactly big, and still, I don't know, they're like 6 weeks behind, 8 weeks behind like new releases. They usually get like one copy of most everything, which is pretty neat. Libraries are cool.
You heard it here last. All right, so let's dip into the question bucket before we call it a day here. Remember, you can send us all your questions at gaming@vice.com with the subject line questions. Wanted to read here an email that Brendan sent in about Minecraft and role-playing. Brendan writes in, "Hi, Waypoint Crew. With all the recent talk and streams of Minecraft, I wanted to share my recent experience with Minecraft roleplay and ask a question alongside it. I have been playing Minecraft for over a decade and couldn't imagine finding anything new or interesting about the game at this point, but a few months ago, I joined a multiplayer server where players roleplay inside the game. Instead of just logging in with a random skin and playing as yourself, you design a character, make up a backstory, and throw them into the world with everyone else. To my surprise, this completely transformed the experience of playing Minecraft for me. Suddenly, I had reasons to build things that would be pointless otherwise. A dusty saloon full of tables and prop drinks becomes a pivotal hangout spot. A spire in the middle of nowhere becomes a point of pilgrimage. Character bits and lore inspire new builds, which in turn inspire new roleplay opportunities that lead to new builds. It's breathed an incredible amount of longevity into a server that would otherwise have been long abandoned. So my question, have any of you ever had a similar experience with a game where some outside component changed the experience and revitalized it for you?
I mean, this one I could speak to pretty directly because like my daughter got me interested, kicking and screaming into Minecraft. And it's interesting that I don't know if I call it role playing, but it's when I was never interested in Minecraft because exactly what they're speaking to, which is it's directionless. Like, what do you want to do? I don't know. Let's just start digging, and then an adventure will. Whereas I need signposts, I need objectives, I need do this, and for me, that is my kid. It is she wants to build this, she wants to go there, and so she becomes essentially my objective signposting because I am there to support the role playing that she is doing in the game, and then that fulfills my desire to have like a big glowing arrow that explains what should I be doing in this space to find the fun. So it's funny that I end up in a similar space if for radically different reasons.
And now you can make signposts in the game.
That's true.
Do you remember that recipe?
Although, Kato just keep me hostage, not allowing me to look at the recipe book. That'll never happen in this household.
Look, you gotta learn. You gotta learn the rules before you can break them.
Kato, I'm curious. Do you have anything like this?
Not that I can really think of. I feel like, the games that I like tend to engage with socially, I start by engaging with them socially. I don't know. I haven't had a lot of this crossover of like something I've played by myself that then I like introduce a new element to is kind of rare. Yeah. Yeah,
it's Yeah, for me, those experiences are like, for instance, like motorsport is a thing that transformed a lot once we started doing Motorsport Mondays with it.
Sure.
Like that is a game where the stuff we dig into on stream is fun and it's cool, like when you're playing solo, but it becomes imbued with a lot more life and character when you have two people sort of reacting to it, leaning into the little bits of the little anchor points of narrative structure,
right?
That the game gives you. Whereas, like when you're playing solo, it's so much easier to just treat the stuff as like that's a buff, that's a that's a debuff, etc. So I think,
his morale's gonna be low. It's like he's down bad because he's going through a breakup is a lot more fun to say and think.
I do think, like, when I don't know if this quite qualifies, but I do think I was probably most interested in Destiny at the point where the lore of the world was harder to access in some ways, because it was more like, I don't know, what's the way to put it? It was more archaeological in some ways, where you'd like go play the game and you discover, you would discover, like, this is the peak Grimoire era, right? But it was like you would get a fragment of a story and it would sort of like recast what is otherwise a pretty, very well executed, but nevertheless very standard, like loot shooter in a lot of ways, or at the time, maybe with loot shooters being less codified when Destiny came out, it certainly felt like much more of a traditional shooter. But either way, it was one of those things where, if you were just looking at Destiny, the game, for all its colorful backgrounds and all the production value put into the game, it could be kind of a drab world from the standpoint of like what's happening in it. What does any of this signify? You going out and shooting up a bunch of aliens on the moon for the 20th time while someone is like, oh, let me tell you about Crota. Crota set my term paper on fire. I can't stop thinking about it. Crota would microwave fish in the microwave and stink up the whole office. Crota, damn you. And you'd be like, yeah, it's horrible. Bang, 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 bang. But like when you would come across little bits of lore, it would sort of turn the entire thing into this kind of, at the time, very exciting place where, is it possible that nobody really knows what's going on in this world because it's hidden, right? That we were all sort of, all the Guardians, all the aliens, that everyone is just kind of like going through the motions and missing what is the actual story here. That stuff was kind of interesting. It sort of it amplified the mysteriousness and alienness of that world in ways that I found harder to sustain later in later periods of Destiny. But yeah, that's probably where I would go. Patrick, I've been sort of sitting on this one for you to come back. This is, I'm not sure anyone signed it. But it's about Roblox and capitalism. So my 10-year-old's favorite game is Roblox.
I'm sorry.
And we've had many, many conversations about the exploitative practices in these games with her, i.e. games having battle passes that just make the game easier to beat, and how these games were purposely made hard because they want her to spend money. We are very open about the exploitative nature of capitalism and how it affects all of us. With all of this, she is given a $10 weekly allowance that she is allowed to spend how she wants. This is usually a Robux card, and she will usually use it to buy clothes for her avatar. I think she is the most fun just making these outfits and showing them off to her friends in-game. She's gotten a few battle passes, but it is typically a game that she continues to play with her friends, and she will use it to help her friends through the game. I'll include a short story at the end of this letter, but she now has her eyes set on one accessory lately called Headless. This item makes the head of avatars invisible. She wants this because it'll make it easier for her to make outfits if she doesn't have to match a face with them. But the kicker is that this item is $300 worth of Robux. I have told her that I will not just give her that money to get it, and that I personally think it's a bad idea, but she wants to save and get it herself, and I won't stop her. I figure it'll be a good lesson saving money to get something she wants while also giving her a lot of time to actually think about it. I also tell my partner that we need a money sink, that we all need a money sink moment to realize what we're spending. I had this as a lapsed Magic the Gathering nerd, but she just got into Pokemon cards, so we'll see how long this lasts. Anyway, cute story about my kid using her money to help. There was a game that had a battle pass that let cursors in the in-game clicks count for more. So she could click and the game would count it as a quad click. And you'd click a button to get coins to buy things in game. She bought this battle pass, loaded up an auto clicker, and set it to click once every millisecond. She flooded the in-game economy and made everyone rich. It was a great moment as a commie parent. Thanks for reading. Fuck capitalism. Go home and take 15-minute bathroom breaks every shift.
I feel like that story justifies your parenting approach here to just let your kid do it. Like I think I would wholeheartedly endorse the yes. Roblox is very exploitative. Like I got to show Rob a little bit of that when we did the stream of that a couple of weeks back. But it is also places like that. It's no more exploitative than so much else of the rest of the world that you're going to experience. Yeah. And to have those little experiences with saving and spending, losing money, spending money, I think it's super healthy to let your kid save that money and then arrive at that choice on their own. I had something similar with my oldest where she had a gift card for the first time. It's for Target. I think it was for $30 or something because it was for her birthday. And she was old enough to understand that things, cost more or less. And I tried to explain, this was maybe 2 years ago. So she didn't really understand math quite yet. She understand basic that numbers are bigger and numbers are smaller, but adding things up was beyond her. Anyway, the point of the story is that I was helping explain. She would ask me about things, how much they cost, and could she get it with the card? And then we got to the end of this, and the thing that hung her up was the card itself. So what happens when the money's gone? I was like, well, they usually take the card and they throw it in the trash. But I want the card. I was like, well, your options are to get these things and then the card goes away, or you just don't get those things and you get to hold on to the card and you can think about buying something later. And she wanted to keep the card. So we spent 45 minutes on a Saturday going over her options, and we ended up at spending none of it because she wanted to hold on to it and she'd worry about it another day. So I think it's a pretty similar arc to what, this person's child might go through, which is just let them. I mean, it's pretty stupid. That's dinky. I get it. I understand wow, that's a lot to spend on something that may bring you very little happiness. But kids love the shit out of Roblox, and I bet they will be. Their friends are going to think they're extremely cool if they get that. And so I actually think, I don't know if it's worth $300. $300 in kids' emotional happiness is hard to quantify, but there's a good chance that actually she'll get it. So yeah, that's interesting. But I would let her walk off the deep end, or not if she chooses not to. But I would let her spend the $300 if she
let her cook.
That's a long time to wait, right? That's a lot. $10. I mean, it's not as though that is happening overnight.
No.
That is
if she comes to the end of 30, 40 weeks of saving up for this thing, she still wants it. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And please write back in. I don't, let me know.
Update.
Let me know the conclusion of this story. I need to know what happens.
Did your child make it 2 weeks? That's where I put that's where I'm shooting the limit. 2 weeks later, not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Although with that loading of an autoclicker story, decent possibility that so my kid's gotten into wire fraud. The idealistic version is so my kid's a hacker and she's on the lam. Anyway, that will do it for today's episode of Waypoint Radio. If you want more from Waypoint, you can follow us on Twitter at Waypoint, Facebook and YouTube, Waypoint Vice. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Zachney. Patrick, where can people follow you?
At Patrick Klubik.
Gato.
At _Cato_appears.
You can check out what we publish on waypoint.vice.com. And hey, thanks to Waypoint Plus, we've been able to have a bunch of fun streams lately. Cato and I returned to Oberhof Racing, and we have made negative progress.
We have a new engine. Things are looking up.
No. The team has made progress. We've made progress in the ways the game like mandates that you will make progress. I mean us as like motorsport managers.
I don't know. We got a 3rd place finish in a race that we were not likely to win.
And then we let another guy drive the wheels off his car.
We don't talk about the second driver.
We don't talk about the other guy. We don't talk about the second driver. So coming up soon, we'll be returning to that, I think, at the end of the week. Patrick is going to be playing some Breath of the Wild to get fired up for Breath of the Wild 2. And I think Patrick and I are also going to, do some management of our own by taking on a rebuild project with Chicago Cubs in MLB The Show, and we will see how that goes as well. For Waypoint Plus listeners, on that same note, Patrick and I are going to be talking with Jason Kebler over at Motherboard, and we're going to be discussing baseball here in time for the start of the season, and just taking a survey of what we expect out of our teams. Are the Cubbies back? Maybe. Probably.
I don't know. They're 1-2, but it's baseball's a lot. Hey, well, there's a lot of game to play.
So many games to play. Anyway, if that sounds
so long.
Yeah.
Well, no,
not anymore.
That's the thing. They're not.
Oh. What?
Yeah.
Call the pitch clock.
Right.
The game I saw. We'll talk more about this on sports, but I was lucky enough to go to opening day, and the game was 2 hours and 20 minutes. That's not a baseball game. Is it a better product? Probably.
Maybe a better TV. Here's my question. It might be a better TV product, but I feel like one of the things when I buy the expensive ticket to go to a baseball game,
right?
It's like I'm buying 3.5 hours of like lounging in the stands and like eating snack food.
Yeah.
That is when I have talked to people subsequently. The short version of is the pitch clock good? Is like, yes, but it's better if you're watching baseball on TV. It's worse if you're watching baseball in a stadium. Is how I came down on that with one game and one experience. But yes, I mean, it was like we had to cancel our last beer order because it was gonna at that point it was going to arrive by the time that we put it in before the cutoff.
Yeah. They still gonna,
but
but the cutoff's still the 7th inning, right?
Yes, but if you've purchased it before then, and they were getting behind in their orders, anyway, but it was like we eventually canceled it because it was like by the time this arrives at our seats, we could get a beer for half the price across the street.
This is gonna be the thing. Like they might decide the pitch clock is too good at this to an extent. Yeah. Like if it's impinging on the concessions thing,
that
might be
do concessions start going even higher, or do they cut back the clock?
I don't know.
Charge more because you're expecting less runs to the stand.
But also are more people coming to the games because it's a more reasonable
chunk of time
thing to attend, right? Like I think nobody knows, right? Like I wouldn't be shocked if there aren't a lot of wild swings made in any direction.
But I think about like the quintessential like LA Dodgers afternoon to evening game, and the other part of what makes that fun is like because the game goes late, you're there as the heat of the day bleeds off, and then you have like a cool night in Dodger Stadium, and you're sitting there with a bucket full of beer, and you're just like, life is good. I love being out here, and I'll be out here for another 90 minutes as the evening breeze kicks up. And I wonder if that's compatible with the TV friendly pitch clock, and to be fair, like maybe offense friendly pitch clock, but all this will be borne out across the season. Anyway, if that sounds good or you just want more Waypoint, you can go to waypointplus.com and subscribe. And not only do you get access to our premium feed, but you're also helping support Waypoint and everything else we do here. And if you want to show not just support but zeal, go to waypointgeneralstore.com to buy some of our fine Waypoint merch. Our theme music is by Bowen. The track is Miss You off the EP Pale Machine. Learn more at waypoint.zone/BOEN. For now, we are calling time on this Tuesday. We'll talk to you again on Friday. Until then, fuck capitalism. Go home.